So here we are, final exam review. We're going to start by taking a look at some of the ideas for your note page before we jump into the session. So I would encourage some of you to dedicate some of your time to, take your notebook out, take as many assignments as you have. If you know that there's a part that you struggled with, you can rejoice somewhat because this is the whole course that we're reviewing for this final. So that means that you don't want to focus on any particular area, but you want to make sure that you can do as good as possible by trying to remind yourself of everything. All right. If you know that you struggled in maybe a few particular places, then you might want to pick one of those to focus on. Okay. But if you feel like there was one part that you really couldn't get and everything else you're okay on, then you have to pick, your battles to try to be intelligent about what you spend your time doing. So maybe, don't spend the whole time working on the quadratic formula if you just couldn't get that. Try to focus on the other things, the things that you might have been stronger with earlier in the semester, and then try to kind of recover some of your memories from that. So I'm going to go through some pointers that I had. The first thing that I want to talk to you guys about is the topics that will be covered on this test. And we have many assignments that we did to build up some of these skills. So there were smaller skills inside of them. And, say factoring, for instance, right? We did an assignment that was titled Factoring Quadratic Expressions, and then we eventually learned how to solve equations by factoring. We learned about how to take square roots, and then we started learning how to solve equations that had square roots in them. So all of these different things built up to something, right? Even when we learned how to add and subtract polynomials and how to multiply them, we built up little by little to being able to use the quadratic formula. And, we started with graphing, which was also something that's going to be covered in this test. And it was something that we did a lot of it. So I'm hoping that you guys can feel confident in kind of reviewing graphing for this process, because lately we've been focusing on the formula. So I would say you have to make sure that you understand the things that you remember, the things that you forgot. If you look at something on this list and you're like, oh man, I was absent for, a period of time, maybe you were sick during one section. But this, is a pretty solid overview of the course. And lately, I'm hoping that what we've been doing with the project is going to help you guys with Vertex standard factored form. It should be pretty simple for you guys to get through the process of graphing on this multiple choice assignment, or this exam. So you get one page of notes front and back. You should include key ideas on this note page. Okay, making this page of notes is going to be a process that is more helpful than having a page of notes. If I just gave you a page of notes with everything on it and you didn't know where to look for something, it's not going to help you as much. So if you make this page of notes yourself, it's going to be much more useful than if you just use someone else's page of notes and you don't know where to find things, and you didn't really activate that prior knowledge. So what you're going to do is focus on definitions, examples, tables, and processes. And I think this is the easiest way to organize your knowledge. So we'll start with definitions. Okay, so copying definitions is a good way to review. It's not necessarily a great way to review, but it's not a bad start. There might be some definitions by now that if you still struggle with them, it's probably not because you haven't copied them down. All right, a lot of times when we can copy a definition, it might reactivate that we realize we knew what that word meant, and you'll spend less time digging through your notes trying to figure out what it was. So find the definition for each term in the list of topics that we just went over. Okay, some of these are on your notes already, and as we work through some of these problems, I would highly recommend that if you get to a point where you're like, oh, I forgot what that word was, then go write that down so that you can, understand the definition of it in a way that will be easy to recall in the middle of a test while you're working on something that you'll know where to look for it. So organizing these notes is a good skill to have. examples are another thing you should have. So like I said, right, find each term in the list of topics. I'm gonna go back to this one before I move on to examples. So that's this list of topics right here. If you don't know what a square root is, that's a problem. If you don't know what the degree of a polynomial is, that's a problem. You should look it up. If you don't know how to tell about the number of terms in a polynomial, that's also something that you should make sure that you have a table and you're able to access that. You could go back and look at old videos and things to try to help you find the key ideas there. We also have, things like the discriminant. If you don't know what that means, then, go copy that down. We did a whole assignment called the discriminant, worked on it for a few days. Then we have the quadratic formula, which is something that, is going to be useful if you have already worked through these kind of problems. You're going to be less confused. Then we have vertex, axis of symmetry, x-intercept, y-intercept, all the different forms, vertex form, standard form, factored form. If you don't know what these things are, then simply copying down the definition and having it there might be a good way to start. Okay, but like I said, it's not a great way because you might not know how to use it. And so that brings us to the next idea of examples, okay, including some completed examples of problems from each topic. So if you went through your assignments and checked off one kind of problem from this whole list and got that into your note page, you'd have a pretty solid page of notes actually that could help you. The next thing would be tables, okay, including tables of data or vocabulary. And if you know that you're going to need that, include that on your note page. So that could be a multiplication table. That might be a square root table, like we did on our assignment called solving by square roots. Maybe some of those will come in handy later. Whatever you think it is that you struggle with, try to do that. Okay, a vocabulary table, such as the table that we use at the beginning of the year to help us organize the degree and the number of terms of a polynomial. Okay, so a lot of students today started copying that onto their page of notes, and that's not a bad way to start, so that you guys know that start the test off with the correct answer. This was also the first two problems on our polynomial exam, so I think you guys have kind of focused on that a lot. I think some people realized that they wanted to start off that polynomials exam with a good score, and so we tended to catch that if somebody didn't get the first two correct. I hope most of you guys have kind of mastered that vocabulary. So, like I also said, forms of equations. Okay, you could make a table of the forms of equations. You could put vertex form, standard form, and factored form, and then you could enter different things into a table about them, like where you say, okay, how do I find the vertex in vertex form? How do I find the vertex in standard form? How do I find the vertex in factored form? All of these different processes where if you make a note to yourself, because you wrote it, you'll be able to remember how to actually do these things. So a table can help you organize some data, but at the same time, processes are at the heart of what you're going to need to know how to do here. You're going to need to understand the whole process. So include a list of steps for solving some problems if you know that you struggle with those, right? Maybe subtracting polynomials. You need to remember, oh, when I have a negative outside of a set of parentheses, then that means I'm going to have to change the sign of these terms that are inside of it and, watch out for the double negatives. Maybe graphing each form, right? Make a list of steps. How do I graph a vertex form parabola? How do I graph a standard form parabola? How do I graph a factored form parabola? We've written these steps down. We've gone through them. And if you watched any video on one of these things, you could go through and just write down the steps that it took to get these problems done. And that could help you out. The next thing might be solving by factoring. Okay, we did a assignment where we eventually had to write a list of steps that began with our step 0, right? Making sure that the equations were set equal to 0, and then after that we would deal with greatest common factors, and then step 2 would be to factor the polynomial finally, and then once you got it factored, you'd set each factor equal to 0, and then you'd solve those. And, you know, we had the same kind of idea when we were solving with the quadratic formula. We understood that we'd have to set it equal to 0, and then we would have to go from there. Identify A, B, and C, copy the formula, plug in the numbers, and simplify, calculate, and there was all kinds of little steps to make sure that we didn't mess up the in-between parts. Solving by square roots was a little different because when you solve by square roots, we do not actually have to set it equal to 0. In this case, you want to solve by isolation the same way that we solved algebra, problems in Math 1, where you just kind of start doing inverse algebra and moving everything to the other side. So these list of processes are there for you. There are videos on pretty much every topic here. And if there isn't, then you can go back and look through your notes and try to find them, okay? You could ask me during office hours tomorrow about one of these topics, and maybe I could try to, do a quick review of them. But, the key thing would be for you tonight to try to start analyzing all of these things and putting these together. So, this brings us to the end of this part right here. How would you prepare a note page? And I'm thinking I'm going to stop this video right now and just let you guys think about this. And I hope that this at least motivates you, that you can kind of wrap your head around the whole idea. I'll do some problems in a review video next that I'll also post. But this main video is about this idea of making sure that you understand the topics on the exam and that you create your note page, as opposed to just trying to put a bunch of problems on there. You want to try to organize things and think about, the words that, if you know that you kept forgetting what axis of symmetry means, then write that down. Give some examples of it, right? If you know that you don't remember what a vertex is, then you would want to do something about that. If you know, hey, I always get x-intercept and y-intercepts confused, then do something about that, okay? I would say that I'm pretty sure that a lot of you guys tend to forget the formula for standard form, how to find the vertex in standard form, right? There was this negative b over 2a formula that we had that would help us get our standard form vertex. So all of these things have been covered. You could find them in that polynomial exam. And so I'm hoping that you guys, actually have some of this stuff in your long-term memory. And the things that you might have, kind of slipped your mind, you'll be able to get those together by just looking over your notes and being sure you understand everything I'm talking about, right? So there's a lot. I understand. I saw some people a little stressed that, we have a final exam on everything that we've done this semester. But, again, that's what a final exam is. So, it comes with the territory here. I think you guys should be up to the challenge. There's not much to be afraid of if you've been in school and you've been working hard this semester. You should be set up for success with all the assessments we've been working on. And if there's something that you've been struggling with, maybe try to highlight the few topics that you struggled with the most, and then, focus on one of them. Don't waste too much time, trying to deal and struggle with the things that were already tough. You have to cover all of this material, so do the best that you can to make sure that you don't, forget some of the things that were easier and that you were pretty good at. All right, good luck studying. Let me know if you have any questions.